I'm gonna try to see this one in theaters. There's clearly experienced people on this project, but keep in mind, this is still a live-action Disney remake. It's pretty obvious Disney has been pandering to the feminist audience, which has felt pretty manipulative in the last couple of remakes. But in this one, it's the story of Mulan, which is probably my favorite Disney film. It definitely makes sense, especially in this story, to pander to that demographic. So the reason I'm worried about this Disney live-action remake is that they could ruin what could be an excellent female-driven story by having her pull off this bullshit. This video is going to be pretty short because I got a much bigger project I'm working on. Mulan 2020 was the most awkward experience of this year. It was a forgettable, poorly directed excuse of a film. I was hoping that at least some parts of it would be mildly entertaining, and some of it was, but a couple of less bad scenes doesn't justify 2 hours of schlock. Now, am I biased towards the original? Yes, yes, and yes. Does that make this movie any worse? Not at all. This movie sucking is its own fault. The aspect I was looking the most forward to was the fight choreography. I did a little research on it for a Tiger Video's video. I saw it was this woman's first time doing fight choreography, and I can't really say she did a bad job. You did not fail me, Moneymaker. I still don't believe that's your real name. Nikki Caro, however, oh my god. Beyond Disney making their movies as sterile as possible, Nikki Caro made some of the most amateur mistakes. Characters would be moving in one shot and then frozen in the next. Everyone's timing was so awkward, and every line delivery was just embarrassing, and nobody gave a good performance, and I don't even think it's the actor's fault. It's a pretty big issue when your main character isn't showing any character. She has so many implied triumph moments, but her held back performance doesn't allow me to experience it. Okay, I'm about to get into spoilers. Skip to this part in the video. 3, 2, 1, go. I don't know whose fucking idea it was to make Ki a thing in this movie that made Mulan special. It completely undermines her struggle as a character. They basically just made her another boring superhero. Who could have seen this coming? There's also an evil henchman, Wich, and she has like a bunch of ki or something. And for some reason, we're supposed to care about how she is judged by other people, but she also kills a lot of people? She's treated pretty much just like a prop in this movie. And speaking of the main villain, he is so one-dimensional. Giving him a backstory doesn't make him any more interesting because it doesn't really affect the story, so I don't know why it's in there. The movie starts off with a completely unnecessary narration. The whole opening sequence is showing Mulan as a child, and the whole time she's acting like an autistic kid. And that's not me being mean, that's literally how she is acting. She's like breaking a bunch of shit, and she's harassing a chicken, and people are yelling at her to stop being so disruptive. And the whole time she's just ignoring everybody and laughing. I actually thought this was a part of her character, but of course it was just poorly presented. And then she does like a hilariously unrealistic flip off of a roof and lands all cool. And then she does like a martial arts stance, and now I'm trying to figure out who the hell was teaching her martial arts. Is it just like the Ki? Is she a Jedi? And the crowd's reaction to this was so bizarre. They all went completely silent and started shunning her for this, despite it being the least disruptive thing she's done. Was it because she showed martial arts? Because then who the hell was teaching her? You think this would be addressed, but it never is. It was all just very confusing and awkward. Mulan's family in general really didn't add anything to the story. There's a scene where Mulan's mother says that the matchmaker found her a husband, but then she goes to do a tea ceremony to see if she can be matched anyway, and of course something goes wrong, where in the original it was the Beetle character and Mulan made a couple of mistakes, but in this one she literally does nothing wrong and everyone is aware of this, but she gets in trouble anyway. Just that one scene had so many contradictions in it, but that's pretty much how the whole movie is written. Eventually we get to the part where she is disguised as a dude but clearly still looks like a chick. So she eventually enters the army camp, and all the scenes here are completely lacking of development. There's like the general group of soldiers that she gets along with, and like in the original, there's a lot of obvious sexism with the soldiers, but the original Disney Mulan used it as a sense of humor because it was aware of how obvious it was. But this one takes the transparent nature very, very seriously. And if you want to go for that, that's fine, but maybe not have it be done by these one-dimensional characters. In the animated one, her friends clearly had passion and were supportive of their newfound comrade. You understood they weren't sexist because they were awful. They were simply ignorant to the value of women as human beings, and Mulan helped them realize this. But in this, they're just assholes. How is that any better? Last thing I want to talk about is the ending. So Mulan finally accepts she isn't as good as other men without special powers, This is what the movie is saying, by the way. And she saves her army with some terrible editing moves and gets kicked out of the military, instead of being killed like how they said earlier in the movie. She has a moment where Darth Vader tells her to join the dark side and she's all fuck that and goes back to help. So Mulan tells General Ip Man that the army is still gonna attack the Emperor, and for no reason other than the script they trust her. They start fighting in the capital and Mulan goes to save the Emperor. After the witch character dies in an implied act of redemption, Mulan then fights the main villain in some random ass construction site and is starting to lose, and then gets reminded, oh yeah, I have superpowers, and last minute knocks down the villain only to further emphasize that her courage is not the reason she is able to win, and then finishes him off with a literal flying spin move to knock an arrow back into the villain that the Emperor tossed up, like he knew she could fly or some shit. So after an incredible party, she's given an offer to join as a general and says no. She travels back home to her father, and of course he explains that he loves her instead of showing it, saying things like she is much more valuable than the equipment she stole, but the military shows up and gives her a sword to replace the old one that she lost? I thought it didn't matter. Wasn't that the purpose of this scene in the original, where her father ignores the gifts because he missed his daughter? But yeah, in the end she joins the army, not because she proves she was just as capable, but because she has superpowers. Now they can exploit her for her abilities. Alright, I'm done talking about this movie. I was hoping it would be good, but the terrible script and directing was a setup for a disaster. I guess but the nicest thing I can say is that it generally looked nice. And there were a lot of things I didn't mention that were wrong with this movie. And had I got into those, this video would be hours long, and this movie is not deserving of that level of attention. Somebody was trying, but it clearly wasn't Disney. I'm giving this shameless nostalgia cash grab a 2 out of 10. Fuck you, Disney. Okay, bye.